Turn my phone on silent.
All right, I think we're live now. We have had to work through some technical difficulties. Let's give it a few minutes. Hopefully, we'll have some folks join. We are live. Give it a few minutes. Give it a few minutes. Then I'll do this intro. All right, we got a thumbs up. Somebody's on. Okay, Quentin, whatever you move in your paperwork is really close to your
Oh,
microphone.
no, let me move this back some. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for being here and confirming that you all can hear us and all that good stuff. Thank you. Hi, Latasha. Hello, hello, hello. All right. Apologies for the lateness. We got off to a kind of challenging start this morning. I'm traveling. Quentin was having some technical difficulty. I was having some technical difficulty. So, but I think we are on point now. Hello, Cynthia. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon, V. Cooper. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Apologies again for the late start. We are going to kick it off. I'm traveling, so I'm in New Orleans, so Wi-Fi and all that stuff on my end was a little challenging. Thank you. Sound is loud and clear. I appreciate the check-in. So I'll kick it off so I don't hold you all day today. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are located. Let me get this right because you know how to do this. I've been practicing. All right, let me go to my slide. There we go. Slide. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Jewel Pearson. This is Miss Bohemian Soul TV. This segment is Creating Home, a tiny house series, and the segment we are about to kick off is one of the conversations on intimate spaces in the series. Every Sunday, I do offer live content. I alternate between this type conversation and the What's Your Question, where I answer frequently asked tiny house questions. When I introduce myself, I like to say that I built a kind of fancy tiny house in 2015. And since that time, I have shared my journey to hopefully inspire others who are interested in the movement. I do offer coaching and consultations to help others in their tiny house journey, and you will be able to find links to schedule with me in the video description below this video once this video goes live. And as I am doing all of that, I like to serve up a lot of representation in the movement along the way. So it is, as you all know, my intent to build a figurative and literal community that is inclusive and accessible. And I hope that if you find this information in the video helpful, you will like it, you'll share it, you'll do all of the things and subscribe to the channel and then turn on the notifications so you will know when content like this is live and we're here sharing all the good stuff. So, good afternoon from Baltimore. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon from Southern California. I thank you for also being here. So, my guest this morning is Quinton Davis, and I'm going to let Quinton introduce himself, and then I'll kind of talk about how we connected, and we'll get started in this conversation. So, Quinton, please introduce yourself to the world, to the audience this morning, this afternoon. Uh-oh, I don't hear you, Quinton. Something happened.
All right, how
Could
about
hear
now?
you before. There you go. I can hear you now.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? My name is Quinton Davis. I am a real estate entrepreneur here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been working on tiny houses, ADUs, Airbnb properties, short-term rental, long-term rentals since about 2014, and I've been working on this now with far as getting into this space, particularly since 2019, as far as the ADUs, building with ship containers and things of that nature. So that's what I've been focusing on now.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm happy to have you. And so, as I kick off this conversation, I always say that I believe that our homes tell a story about us, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And then, as I'm talking to people in this movement, people who live in tiny houses, people who are involved in this movement, I've always come up with that there is a lot of intent in our decisions to get here. In people, for people who live in tiny houses, there's a lot of intent in our design, and that's usually what we explore in this conversation. So I know that you're kind of on the outskirts of, you're not a tiny house dweller, but you work kind of in some of the small spaces, and we're going to talk about how you got there. But and so this conversation isn't exactly about tiny houses or tiny houses on wheels. But I still feel like that by the time we wrap this conversation up, we will determine that there was a lot of intent in you working in real estate, the spaces that you work in, and the decisions in your pathway here. And that's kind of what we'll talk about. So I always say and share that with the audience that it's bigger than actually the tiny house. It is really a lot about who that person is and how they got into working into that space. And so that's what we always talk about in this conversation. So Michelle says, "Welcome, Quentin." So we
How
welcome
you
you
doing,
to our
Michelle?
space. um, so let's talk about your real estate and your real estate focus. So you and I met I don't a few years back, and so we kind of met on some travel drama that I was handling for a group of people. And then you and I connected from in that travel space, but we also had a connection around tiny houses.
Yes.
Your interest was in the work that I was doing in tiny houses. And you're in real estate. Your real estate focus, if as I shared your bio, and your bio will be presented in the description of the video, but your bio speaks to your specialization in affordable housing, in nonprofit leadership, and um, kind of talk about what led you to, like, there's so many areas that you can go into in real estate. Atlanta is a great big market, so you could be focused on the mega mansions and sales in that area. What led you to specializing around affordable housing and the nonprofit kind of leadership sector?
Good question you asked that. I've been doing disaster relief as well since about 2016,
Okay.
and I've been doing disaster relief work from Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and also in Georgia. And one thing I know that's common between all the different places is the housing issue, right? And people, when they have a hurricane or tornado or flood or whatnot, they cannot afford to do any repairs because of the
Mm,
cost of their the
hmm.
repairs, the cost of insurance, the cost to replace anything. And after years and years and years of seeing people go through the same thing over and over and over and over, especially people in Louisiana who lost their home. I met a gentleman there. He lost his home 12 times in the past 23
Oh, wow.
years.
Wow. Wow.
And I asked him, I said, why do you keep staying? He said, I can't afford to move anywhere. So he basically saved up enough money to pay the deductible on the insurance for his home and rebuilds every single year.
Wow.
And I asked him, hey, are you going to move this time? He said, yes. He's finally able to move because he's going to move somewhere in Mississippi where it's a little bit cheaper for him. But all this experience from short-term rentals, long-term rentals, to seeing people go through the mortgage crisis and financial issues and stuff like that has made me go into this route. Um, and with the rising rent right now in Atlanta, the rising cost of a median home price being $438,000, that's a huge a jump from when I was growing up and when I see a house like, oh, it's $160,000. That's a little bit high,
Right.
But now,
Right.
20 some years later, $438,000 for a starter home is a
The
lot.
standard.
You can't
Yeah.
even. It's a standard, and with the price for renting an apartment now, you got to make three times the amount of money to get into an apartment now. It doesn't matter what part of Atlanta you live at, if it's Macon, Georgia, or if it's in Warner Robins or anything like that, you still have to make three times the amount. And for me, that's kind of hard for someone if they're only working at McDonald's or if they're a new firefighter or if they're a school teacher. Why should everybody be punished for the cost of corporate greed? So
Agree.
that's kind of what
Agree.
inspired me.
What inspired you? And I have shared here that one of the things that I've read as my interest in tiny homes for as opportunities for affordable housing and the housing advocacy discussion. An article I read a few months ago said that there is nowhere in the United States that someone who makes minimum wage can afford a two-bedroom apartment. That nowhere in the United States. And that is why we are in the situation we're in for with the affordable housing crisis. Why we have the situation where the working where they're calling it the working poor. They work, but they can't afford housing, so they're still unhoused, but they have jobs because they can't afford it. Casey said
Right.
what Casey is saying made it to my first live. Welcome, Casey. You're here in for a good conversation. Welcome to your first live, and we hope it won't be your last. Um, Question. So, when you were in your working in real estate, your focus also in that nonprofit, the affordable housing sector, you also were doing some work around short-term rentals with Airbnb, in also doing corporate long-term rentals. And my guest a couple of weeks ago, Vaughn, has a she shed in her backyard, and so we were talking about 80. We were talking about ADUs, but we also more we're talking about Airbnb and Airbnb as an option for additional income opportunity for wealth
Right.
building. But as you and I have talked, there was a shift in 2014 in Atlanta that began where they began allowing ADUs. And my audience, you're supposed to know what ADUs are, but we I have a little slide, but ADUs, accessory dwelling units, those buildings, homes in the backyard. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But there was a shift for you. Well, so let's go back. What was your focus when you were
2019.
2019, I'm sorry, 2019. What was your, so when you were focused more on the Airbnb marketing, you and I kind of talked about this before. You saw something happening with Airbnb in the Atlanta market, even though it was the work that you were doing that kind of stood out for you as a problem. And I think that was starting a shift for you as well. Let's talk about that a bit, your what you were doing, and then the shift that you saw happening with Airbnb in the market.
Well, the biggest shift that I saw is that legislative issues start coming into place. You know, the hotels were lobbying against Airbnb usage in Atlanta. The Super Bowls are coming in or had already been here, so they were like, "Hey, we need to go ahead and shut this down immediately." Um, and also, when I got started in 2014, there was no verbiage in the lease for short-term rentals. It was nothing. It wasn't. It was nothing wrong with that at all. But come 2019, 2018, 2019, they start changing the verbiage in the leases and whatnot. And now it came to a point where corporate rentals become outlawed, unless everybody had a background check. So I started seeing the fact that one, it was cool to get started in Airbnb and not own anything, but you need to start owning something because they're going to full control and they can shut you down at any point. I had friends lose a lot of money with come down to starting the different Airbnb properties and whatnot. And then the shift also changed with the type of guests that are starting to stay at Airbnbs. Caused a lot more damages, parties, crimes, especially coming through Atlanta. Um, and then I decided, hey, I need to figure out different things I need to do. And I started learning more about the tiny houses on wheels. I started traveling around from Nashville, Colorado, Texas, going to different places, manufacturers and whatnot. And then I started to learn more about the ADU process. And that's when I decided, hey, that's the route that I want to go with. And that's what I want to specialize in and bring a great product to Atlanta.
One of the concerns that we also, in when we were meeting the other day, one of the concerns that you mentioned that you saw happening with the market with the short-term rentals and with Airbnb was also the impact that as corporations were buying up housing for ADUs, what was happening to the long-term residents and being priced out of homes and markets. Talk a bit about what you've seen there.
So in Atlanta, right now, out of every 100 homes, only 37 are affordable and that's people that are making $49,000 and below. And what we call that nationwide is the missing middle. So I want to represent the missing middle and provide them another option for housing. And that's one of the keys to keeping America going right now. I want to represent. I want to help. I not represent. I want to help out the single mother who has to choose between putting food on the table or paying the rent in the next week or so. A lot of people are making those harsh decisions. A lot of women, single parents, I'll say, are making hard decisions on what should be done now, if they should go to school, work or whatnot, because daycare is too expensive. I mean, they have so many different things. The inflation is crazy right now. So those are the main things that I see right now going on.
But you also, with that, what was happening where with the missing middle is that Airbnb, the opportunity to make money on these short-term rentals, they were taking over the housing market. So they were pushing the opportunity and
Yes.
availability out. Is Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, where we had a lot more people decide they want to open up Airbnbs, we're talking about availability went from, let's say, 900 homes on Airbnb in Atlanta. Now this is just a small number, but I'm just giving an example. Went from 900 to 13,000 in a matter of 3 weeks. And so now those extra homes, those extra 12,000 homes are no longer available that are affordable. Now the rental prices have gone up because the demand is so high, but it also caused by the fact that they're all short term rentals, corporate rentals, or whatever you want to call them, and that's what the main issue is right now. And then now they're very strict on income requirements, um, background checks, and things like that. It's a lot more stricter now.
Yeah. We know that even in some cities, they have taken action to where they have limited the number of Airbnbs they will allow, and even have put real restrictions around Airbnb because they saw that the Airbnbs were taking the share of the market that they needed to actually provide housing for people. So that's where it's, on the one side it's an opportunity for financial gain. It also is causing some damage to neighborhoods and to communities and to the affordable housing conversation and availability. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to jump into, I've got some slides that I want to share based on some of the work that you're doing and give you an opportunity to talk to it. So your company is Residual Realty, and
Yes.
you, with your interest in um, accessory dwelling units as an opportunity for this affordable housing conversation, you are launching an initiative. And I wanted to, in Backyard Home, BKYD. It took me a minute, y'all, so I want to hip y'all to the game. BKYD is backyard. So Backyard Home, talk about this initiative that you're working on with Backyard Home.
So backyard home is very simple. It's nothing but a tiny house that is behind our primary home in Atlanta right now. That where we starting this initiative, and we focus on developing studios, one bedrooms, and two bedroom, one bath units. Also, studio, one bedroom, and two bath, or one bath units that are also going to be ADA compliant. And these units will be rented at 20% below market rate. The program works very simply. We partner with homeowners. They provide a background check, the backyard. We do a ground lease on the backyard, and then we provide 100% of the financing for the ADUs that go in the backyard, as long as they agree for affordable housing for a minimum of 5 years. And then we also, the terms of the ground lease are 25 years. And
Okay,
then we
so
actually focus
Quentin,
on,
step back just a minute because I
all
want
right.
to give you some opportunity to dive into that. So right now the focus is on the accessory dwelling unit, um, being an option, a sustainable and equitable housing solution option. And
Yes.
so, again, and we were talking about ADUs, we were talking about tiny houses. And so, my audience, I talk about the fact that tiny houses on wheels are a challenge because they're on wheels. So, an accessory dwelling unit is going to be built on foundation. And so, when you're building, it's a smaller home on foundation, and so then you're working through the permitting process and you're working with the city. And so it is an option then that is allowable because it is on foundation. And so I'm going to change a slide because we didn't get to walk through your slides, Quentin, but I wanted to kind of step us through this process. So when you're talking about these ADUs, looking at this slide, let's talk about the needs that are being met with the
Let me
opportunity
pull that
that
up
you're,
as well.
I'm sorry.
So I'm going to pull it up as well.
Yeah. So can you see my slides?
I can. It's just real small. So let me
Okay.
pull it up on my.
So this is your slide that shows
Yes.
the need that's being met through the ADUs or the opportunities that they can help with.
Yes. Let me just pull it up here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up on my screen.
And I'm
All
sorry,
right.
I can okay, go ahead.
I have it here. Can you still see me?
No, 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 no. They just see the slide.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So with the ADUs, they provide a shelter for the homeless individuals. They provide emergency shelter, transitional housing, community housing, and affordable rentals. That is the primary use for our program for the ADUs, and these can definitely deal with people, help people with addictions, people who are released from incarceration, people who need immediate shelter, people who are dealing with domestic abuse, addiction, illness, mental health, veteran, or people who are also dealing with employment issues. And then one thing
Okay.
that it focuses on as well is stability.
Right, right. Okay. So there's a question in the chat, and I'm gonna come, Sophia, I see your question. We're gonna come back to this. So backyard, this accelerator program that you're working on presenting in within the city within Atlanta. So this is using shipping containers for residential use. And so, Sophia, your question is asking, so does that mean the person has to have their land? Yes. So what happens with an accessory dwelling unit is it is, so think of neighborhoods where you have, I think sometimes the word is like a carriage house or a mother-in-law suite in the backyard, or what you, as we talked to my guest, Vaughn, um, 2 weeks ago, where she had the she shed. An accessory dwelling unit is a smaller structure in the backyard. It is oftentimes there's in some areas there's a requirement that the ADU is somehow connected to the main house. Not everyone has that requirement. Each city establishes their rules for one, whether they allow ADUs, and then if they allow ADUs, they determine the rules for those ADUs. Um, ADUs are generally owned by the structure in the backyard is generally owned by the homeowner, and I believe that is the rule in Atlanta. Though I want to mention for people who are follow my channel, I do share that in several cities, it's about, I think right now 7 cities in California, they allow tiny houses on wheels as ADUs, and they can then have a separate owner. So the homeowner, the traditional conventional homeowner, owns his home, has his backyard. In those cities, they can allow a tiny house person, a tiny house on wheels dweller, to live in pull their house. Sorry, my power started trying to go out. They can allow a tiny house on wheels owner to live in the backyard because California has rewritten their requirements for ADUs. So I just want to pivot to that, and because I'm always trying to draw tiny houses on wheels in this conversation. So
Yes.
and wanted to give a little more um, clarification on exactly what ADUs are. And so this backyard accelerator, Quentin, as you were sharing with us, you want to accelerate the construction of ADUs, and you're
Yes.
through this process. And so again, I didn't get a chance to show him the slides that I was covering, so I want to kind of give him an opportunity to talk through it. So talk about, so between these two, this slide, is there anything else? Because the next slide is kind of, I took the information talking about the
Okay,
benefits.
I see
Anything
what you're doing as
else?
far as breaking it up.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk to in your home accelerator program that we should talk about right here?
Oh no, I can wrap it up at the end.
Okay. Okay. So then when we're talking about the benefits of this ADU in the backyard, or in the backyard home benefits, that's what you were getting ready to talk about a few minutes ago. Some Here are some of the benefits of considering using this process. And Quentin, do you want to talk to us through these benefits?
Yes, I can do that. So one of the big benefits is that you're going to have somebody in your backyard. You're going to be able to receive rental income from that. You're going to have an easier access to equity. And what I mean by easier access to equity is you're going to have more finished space when your house is appraised for it. If you decide to sell it in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years or whatnot. The environmental benefits. One of the big things about the ADU is that we're striving towards a net zero unit. So we're going to have solar panels. We're going to have a water reclaim system built onto the roof. If you want to have family housing, if you want to have your elderly parents or elderly children, or not elderly children, but sick individuals who are in your family, if they want to be there in the backyard, they can do that as well. And that way, have easier access to them. That way, if a nurse or anything like that has to come there, they can come right to the backyard. If you're personally dealing with anybody who has Alzheimer's or dementia or anything like that, it's easier access as well, and you also can know if they're safe as well.
Right. This is, as we talk about ADUs, we talk about the opportunity for the elderly, like you just mentioned, having, your parents, in-laws, if you need access to them. It gives them a sense of still freedom. They're not in the home, but they have their own home, but then they also have the safety of being connected to you. For college students who aren't able to, as we were just talking about, the affordable housing crisis and the challenge for someone making minimum wage to even afford a two-bedroom apartment anywhere in the United States. This is providing them housing and independence, because again, senior people as well as college students, they still want to have a semblance of independence,
Yes.
but you're providing them housing as well as allowing them to still have their own independence. And one of the things, and I've spoken about this in my work, in my conversations with the city of Charlotte, because if um, I was really living in this type situation, as I've lived in backyards in my tiny houses. So the homeowner is providing me a place to park my tiny house. The benefits, as we kind of look at this, their backyard is doing absolutely nothing. In the case where I was in the backyard, it was actually an eyesore because he didn't always keep the yard cut. There were, bottles, and people would hang out in the backyard in the neighborhood and used it as kind of a hangout spot, and then they discard their trash there. So I come in, I clean up this eyesore. I am providing the homeowner income, because I'm paying him to allow me parking in his backyard. So I'm supplementing his income, and then he's providing housing. So if we consider this opportunity for the unhoused, here's housing availability for the unhoused, in neighborhoods they typically would not have access to, but they need to be in those neighborhoods potentially for access to their services, or for unhoused family members who are experiencing challenges, or as you were saying, the seniors or the college students. So we have to, and I've kind of taken over your conversation, but this is
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm gonna add to it.
this is how do you address the affordable housing challenge if you continue doing things the same way that you've been doing them? It is not the building of more houses in the name of affordable housing that by the time that community is built, it doesn't turn out to be affordable housing and people can't afford them. So this backyard home opportunity is absolutely a way to think outside of that box and provide housing that actually is affordable. So Quentin, please, what else were you going to add here?
No, 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 I was just gonna say that. I was like, one thing I was gonna add to that is my grandfather recently passed from dementia, and one thing I learned from that is I didn't have time to build out a home where we can. My parents could, my family could take care of him a lot closer to home, right? Because one of the
Mm-hmm.
issues that we had was that he kept leaving out his own home,
Mm-hmm.
going out to the streets and things like that. And one of the primary focuses now is that I want to focus on people who are dealing with those issues so they can age in place and be safe as well, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's an opportunity for more people like myself to be able to provide that type of protection, that type of security for our family members and whatnot, that would be great, you know, because
Absolutely.
it's expensive for those type of housing, and it's expensive for that type of care. And the earlier stages of dementia, Alzheimer's, or anything thing like that, it'll be a lot better if the family member was just
Right.
outside. You
Right.
know, that
Right.
way they can still go inside if they wanted to. They can still you still have your space.
That
They have
independence.
their
Yep.
space. Yeah, they have their independence. If they want to go to their mailbox, they can do that. If they want to just sit outside on the patio, they can do that. If it's you know, they want to walk around, they can still do that. And then you have the sense of security because you know that they're right there. If something was
Right.
to happen, they slip and fall. All you gotta do is run out the back door, run out to the garage, and boom, they're there. You know,
Right. Right.
things like that have inspired me as well. Also, learning how to track the individuals as well. You know, and I keep saying individuals, but your family members, your loved ones.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I see so many people who are dealing with these issues, or the fact that we have so many college kids who want to go to school, but they can't afford housing and they don't
Right.
want to live too far. You know, we can literally put some of these ADUs in the back of homes outside of Morehouse, Clark, Atlanta, on the west side of Atlanta, and then they'll have access to go to school and be able to come back and be able to sleep at least 8 hours or whatnot. But right
Right.
now, they're forced to travel an hour because of the cost of housing for a college student or whatnot. And
Right.
we have police officers. The Atlanta police officers, the APD has initiated a program. A lot of the police departments where they let you take the car home because they know that you're driving an hour and 10 minutes each way to work. So they give them the police car, and they're on their way home. As long as they answer calls within the city limits of Atlanta, they're allowed to take the car home, and then allowed to bring the car back to work the next day and things of nature. Police officers shouldn't have to drive 2.5 hours each day if they want to work in their same county or their same city or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with teachers. Why are teachers who in one county have to drive an hour? And then traffic in Atlanta is crazy, you know. So imagine that type of stress you have to put on as a teacher to drive an hour and a half to get to that classroom and then try to
Right.
unwind
Right.
and then try to do your job. You know, that's unnecessary. I think that these are some of the solutions. ADU is not going to be the 100% all solution,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
it's a step in the right direction.
Right. So let's answer some of the questions, and then I
All
want
right.
to give you an opportunity to talk about how people can get connected with the program. That's where we're going next. This is your next slide. But I want to answer some of the questions in the chat. And so you may or may not know the answer to this question. I think you might. So this question, and I've just added it, is what tax identification should I be using if I own Airbnb? Is that a sole proprietor, LLC, or incorporated? Do you know?
Uh,
Can go ahead.
to be
Sorry.
honest, those type of questions should be answered by your
By
tax
tax.
person,
Yes.
tax
Yes.
specialist.
I knew you were gonna say
Because
that.
yeah, the biggest thing is I can't give advice on that. But me particularly, everything is in an LLC. Then it's protected by a trust, so that way I'm not personally liable for anything that goes wrong. If someone was slip and fall, death, or anything like that, I, I'm not personally liable for those things. But you need to have
That's
the
the
advice
route.
of
Yes.
someone.
The
Yeah,
route you chose and that works best for your situation is an LLC, but that's going to vary per situation.
it's going to
Right.
vary. Yes.
Right. Okay. So there's another question about the ADU tax that I know you're going to talk about that because you and I spoke about that. So, Robert, I'm going to hold on your question in just a minute there. But I want to add this comment because JD is saying, based on what we're talking about here, JD has mentioned this is also an opportunity for elderly homeowners to rent their home and live in the ADU when they need less space. Absolutely. They then build the ADU, live in the ADU, and maybe it's their children and the children's larger family that then can be the inhabitants of their original home, but they don't need as much space. Or maybe, as JD is saying, they rent out that house and it provides them income, and they recognize that they can live in the ADU for a smaller space. Absolutely. There's so much opportunity here. And Sophia, I see your question. I'm going to answer your question in just a minute. Quentin, I think you were getting ready to say something.
But I'm just listening
Oh, okay. All
because I
right.
can't see any of
So,
the questions.
okay. No, no, no. Um,
Oh, you know what? I see the questions now. I had to click on the chat log.
okay. All right. Um, so this backyard accelerator. You, uh, so Sophia's question is this targeted only for Georgia or through all 50 states? And so before we answer that question, because that's a great question, Sophia, thank you. Talk about um, uh, talk about a little bit more benefit of the program because Robert's question was around the tax increase on the ADU in your backyard. And so Quentin, I know I've had conversation with you around some of the programs that you're trying to work through that address how the taxes would be addressed on the for your program. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that?
So with the tax issue, tax, your taxes are going to increase. We're not going to deny that at all. But through this particular program, we're going to take care of the tax increase for the ADU from the program. But we're lobbying right now to have the taxes frozen for the first 5 years to allow the homeowner to get caught up on taxes if they are behind on taxes, and then hopefully continue that on past 5 years or 10 years or forever, as long as they have an affordable housing resident. Um, and that's kind of what the I don't know exactly the percentage of what um, the tax increase will be for any city or any state or whatnot or wherever your home is located. As far as this program, we're initially doing it here in Atlanta,
So
and
wait, wait,
we're going to
wait,
be open.
wait 1 second. Wait one
Okay,
second. I want to stay on the tax conversation.
all
So
right.
what you're trying to do is lobby for an incentive for the homeowner that if they
Yes,
participate in this program, they then are the incentive is that that tax increase is frozen for 5 years.
yes,
Okay. So allowing them, so kind of like what I've spoken about, the time that I needed after spending money to build my tiny house. There was for me like a 2.5 year recouping period where I needed to recoup the funds that I had spent on this tiny house so that I could get myself right up again and move forward. So that's what kind of the incentive that you're proposing is that people would have the opportunity after going through this program. There's going to be expense with the program for building this ADU, but you're trying to lobby so that they would receive some incentives in helping them right side up because they are helping with this affordable housing crisis. So there ought to be some incentives for them.
yes. Well, in this particular program, we're taking care of the cost 100%, but in hopes of them also being able to get caught up on their taxes, because a lot of people are behind on their home taxes and
Okay.
or the property taxes. We want to make sure that we preserve and create more affordable housing, because where every ADU goes in behind of a backyard, we essentially are creating two affordable houses, and that's what's important as well.
Right, right. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk more about the finance. I didn't include a slide about the financing. So this is the last slide that I have to share here, but I do want you to talk about applying for the program and then you and I are going to continue our conversation because I do want you to step back to talk about the financing piece of it and what the program would offer.
Okay.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say on Monday we're going to. You can follow on Instagram, backyard BKYD home on Instagram, and then we're gonna. I'm gonna drop the link for everybody to start signing up on Monday. So tomorrow morning we'll put the link up, and you can apply. And for more information, as far as if wherever you're located in the United States, primarily here in Atlanta as well, and that's the
Okay. And so I will, once that link becomes available, I'll also update the video description and add the link here in the video description. So anybody watching the
yes,
replay, that will be added to this video, just the video on Monday. But what I understand, Quentin, from our conversation is right now the focus is on Atlanta, but you also want to collect information for people in other cities and other areas that are interested in this program because you see Atlanta as your template or your trial and you want to expand this as there is need in other areas. That's correct. That's correct.
yes,
Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. So I am going to switch back to us so we can continue this conversation, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about financing. So let me see if there are any questions. So here, Sophia, this was your question. Is this targeted only for Georgia or through all 50 states? So again, the intent is to start as a trial in Atlanta, collect people who are interested in Atlanta, but also start going ahead to collect information for people in other areas who are interested so that you can roll this out in other areas.
yes.
Okay, let me see if there's another comment. Okay, so Casey is saying, I'm in Atlanta. I actually visited some available ADUs in Atlanta. They were going for $2,500 plus. I recently received a notice for another one and it was over $3,500. Where are the affordable ones? So I'm assuming, Katie, you're speaking to $2,500 a month to rent the ADU. That's not a little bit a lot clear to me, but I'm thinking that was rental.
Yes, I've seen those ADUs that are going for 2,500, 3,500 a month, and those prices are market rate, are above market rate, and that's not what we're looking to do. And
Okay.
we're gonna go with all the prices for the rent will be based on the HUD standards right now.
Okay. And Judith is saying the same thing. Here in California, just outside of LA, our neighbors renting their 400 square foot ADU for $2,700. That is crazy and unreachable to some. So, one, we also know we all have to factor in pricing in California. Pricing in California has always been um, unreachable based on what we see on the East Coast. We know those the numbers are a lot different, even for people who are renting lots for parking for their tiny houses. What they pay for tiny house parking is oftentimes like three times what I pay on the East Coast. So we know there's the disparity there, but it is still very unreachable for a lot of people. Um, Okay, so Casey is saying yes to rent, $2,500 or $3,500 to rent. And so the program, Quentin, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the financing and some of the things that you were speaking to in covering what the program offers for financing and covering some of the costs for the homeowner and then kind of the rental numbers.
Yes, as far as the financing, like I was mentioning earlier, is it'll be 100% finance. Only requirement for the homeowner is complete a application fee, and then also all the residents in the home will have to do a background check. And that's simply because we don't want to place anybody there who has a violent felony or sex offender. And then as far as the pre-development costs, the construction costs, and the management stuff, we will be handling all that stuff.
Okay. All right. So, so I know you are working through, and I'll go ahead and say that I am very interested in the work that Quentin is doing, because a lot of it for me relates to the conversations that I've had around tiny houses on wheels in backyards, parking for tiny houses, the opportunity to have tiny houses in urban space. And I'm again speaking to tiny houses on wheels, the opportunity to have them available in urban spaces versus having to be in rural areas right now. This is the way that that we get to accomplish this. And so, what Quinton's program, the backyard home program, is focused on right now is contain the use of containers for this. But I
Yes.
also see this the longer term vision and opportunity to also consider using tiny homes on wheels. So just when I keep saying conversations we've had, know that I'm in deep conversation with Quinton because I see the synergies between the work that I'm doing and the work that he's doing and opportunity. So um, I want to address that. And I was just getting ready to ask you another question. Was there something you were getting ready to say? Because I lost my question.
No, I was looking at I'm looking at the chats and everybody's saying how much the rents are in various areas or whatnot. Um, right now, the average one bedroom in Atlanta is around, well, some of the newer buildings that are coming on, and in the city of Atlanta, I've, I've seen the highest is $2,600 as an affordable housing for one bedroom. And I'm like, who's paying $2,600? And essentially, who's making three times $2,600 for that affordable housing? If you are a part of the missing middle, it's impossible. So the prices that we're looking at are anywhere going to be anywhere from 900 to as high as $1,500 a month for up to 725 square feet as far as the ADUs.
So JD is asking, is there any interest from HUD Secretary Fudge, who seems sincere in her concerns about affordable housing? So I shared last week. So I've been in Secretary HUD's DMs. I've been shooting my shot in Secretary HUD's DMs and in her comments talking about trying to talk about tiny houses and affordable housing. I have not had any response from her yet, but you all know I am persistent, so I intend to keep spamming her inbox and her comments to talk affordable housing. But nothing yet. So y'all just stay tuned and y'all help me as I make those comments. Y'all need to go over there and comment and say I'm interested as well. This is
Yeah, we
something
all got
that
to come together.
that you, all the support. So it doesn't seem, and it's support in addition to liking my comment. It is commenting to say, yes, this is something that I'm interested in, because what I have seen over the 8 years that I've been in this movement is when initially people thought I was the crazy one and I was just interested in tiny houses and I was weird. But the more we have people in the room that are agreeing with, yes, this is something that I'm interested in, and the more that they can see this is regular people looking, doing regular things, regular jobs, and just want somewhere to live, then it starts to make more sense, and it's something that they have to address because it's numbers. And yes, Crystal, I know that you support me. I thank you so much. Thank you for support. So, Quinton, talk about where your timeline for and high level timeline. I'm not trying to pin you down into anything, but talk a bit about what you hope your timeline to be for this program, this initiative that you're working on.
Well, from August 1st to August 31st, we're looking to sign up as many people as possible and find out the geographic locations where we'll launch next. Primarily, also, we're going to be getting it fully financed. I'm not financed, but fully funded by September 1st as well. So that way we can build the first 100 homes in here in Atlanta and also be able to track to do the next 100 in a different city and so on and so on.
Okay. So let's get back to talking about you. What this work that you're doing, your interest in affordable housing, the connection that you and I made years ago around tiny houses. If you think about your background, kind of growing up, is there anything that you can target that kind of has led you to this interest in the work that you're doing? Where was that light bulb that, and you talked a bit about this, but more in like the real estate spectrum. Was there anything even further back that you can identify that maybe you can see it? I can see why I'm interested in this work now.
Well, me traveling around the world. I travel between here, the United States, to Dubai, to South Africa, to Central America, um, Europe, and things of that nature. And I learned so much about the housing crisis around global housing crisis globally.
Hmm.
And then also traveling to California. The first time I traveled to Los Angeles, I was driving to, I rented a car, and then I went to CVS, and I noticed that the parking lot was full. And I was just trying to figure out why the parking lot full with all these like SUVs and regular cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the person working there, said, they allowed to sleep here at nighttime, and then they leave in the morning. I said, why in the world are they doing that? Why they can't find somewhere they don't have a home to sleep in or whatnot? And they said, no, they're outpriced. They're working 2 to 3 jobs, so the they allowed them to sleep there. And then I went to the Staples Center. I went to like LA Live and places like that, and same thing. Every underpass had so many tents.
Yeah.
Skid Row, so many tents and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just anywhere you go to, you're gonna find a housing issue. And then when I learned that they actually were making money by renting out the parking lots and actually allowing people to sleep there overnight and just pay $25 to sleep somewhere, they're paying $25 a night just to park their car in a parking lot just for to sleep and allow them to use the bathroom in a porta potty or whatnot was crazy to me.
Yeah. It's a sad state of affairs when we consider the this is supposed to be the wealthiest country in the world, and we have people like you said paying $25 to park to live in their vehicle in a parking lot. I'm in New Orleans, and um, the unhoused situation here, the tents that you see as you're riding around, um, is disappointing and discouraging and sad, and just a sad situation. And so it has to, we have to, I say it every week, we have to think out of the box for housing solutions, because we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results as far as housing. Um, okay, so I see the question. So I'm not gonna shame you for joining the conversation late. ADU is accessory dwelling unit. I'm just gonna ask you to kind of replay this when it goes live so you can see the conversation where we talked about ADUs and what that really means. So I don't want to cover it again, but we did talk about it. ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. So replay this and kind of catch up on that piece where we were talking about ADUs and how they are applied, and this conversation will then make more sense. Absolutely, a sad state of affairs. And so Crystal is speaking to the fact that, and that van life has boomed because of housing not being affordable, and that not everyone wants to live in their vehicle. It's not optional, it's not a choice. I also noticed that as travel, and when you travel internationally, you realize that a lot of people internationally are used to living small. It makes more sense to them to live small. It's not the necessary excess that we're used to here in the United States. But I also noticed in traveling in California, just kind of walking down the streets, and you realize um, RVs are parked and vans are parked, and you know someone is a dweller. This is their home in this parking spot. And it, for me as a tiny house dweller, it kind of, I don't know that I would have even paid attention to that many years ago, but just being more cognizant of the affordable housing conversation, and as a tiny house dweller, and being familiar with van life and understanding, it is not always by choice. It is sometimes something that's necessary that people are having to do. And for me, it also added a little bit more a need for respect, because now I know, where you might be looking at vehicles and kind of looking in windows. I have a different respect in recognizing this is probably someone's home, and I want to be respectful and not be violating their personal areas, because it might be a home. And so I think that's another conversation. that we have to have. Rosalind, good afternoon. We're happy you're here. You're late to the party, but I know you're gonna catch up, and I appreciate you catching up. And Judith is saying, absolutely, the dollar is of more value here in than the human in the United States, and it's a very very sad thing where we're not focused on the right of housing that everyone should have. And one of the key things, Quentin, that you said, and I say it constantly, is that this work that you're doing with the backyard home accelerator using containers as ADUs. I say it as well as for tiny houses on wheels as part of the affordable housing conversation. We're not saying this is the solution. It is not the answer to the affordable housing crisis, but it is absolutely one of the solutions that could and should be considered. There are other
Yeah.
options, but this is one of the ones that should be looked at and considered. And that is why this work that you're doing is important, and the work that I'm doing is important, so that we can start thinking outside of what has been the status quo, and really address the housing concerns, and the housing issues that we have. Quentin, what have you? We've been here for a minute, so we're gonna wrap up in a little bit. Again, for people that are interested in the work that he's doing, he's gonna provide a link that I will update in the video description tomorrow to provide a form, so that if you're interested in the work that he's doing, if you're interested in um, participating in this backyard home accelerator, that you'll have a link um, to do so. I'll also provide all of his contact information. Y'all already know I do that, so you will have access to his contact information to follow him on IG. Um, all right, so Robert is asking, why aren't tiny homes included as new building development? Why aren't developers developing communities specifically for tiny homes? And that's a big, broad question.
Yeah.
Quentin,
So
go
there
ahead.
are there
You
are there are developers are building tiny house communities,
Tiny houses
uh,
on foundations, y'all. Tiny houses. So
tiny house
we
on
talk about
foundation.
that. Yes.
Yes, and those particular homes are sold on their own individual parcel of land. I've seen some, and I think it was Austin, Texas, that were going for $100,000 for. I think it was like 800 something square feet. There's some here in
It's a
Atlanta that
community
were,
in Atlanta. Yeah.
yeah, and they actually just announced their second location that they're going to be doing. Um, it's supposed to be dropping next month. It's supposed to be in Union City, Georgia. So those are the few ones that I do know that are selling the tiny houses on foundations right now.
Yeah. So again, it is the conversation of changing laws and changing rules, and people understanding that there is a demand for, and I'm always representing tiny houses on wheels. So tiny houses on foundation are allowed in lots of areas, because in lots there are a number of cities that don't have a minimum square footage requirement. So if the city doesn't have a square footage minimum requirement, you can build a small home, a tiny home on foundation in that city. It won't even have to be an accessory dwelling unit. You could build a small home on foundation on a piece of property if the city does not have a square footage minimum requirement. But you also are going through the permitting process. You're going through the same building process that you would go through for a conventional home, which also entails being involved in the permitting process, and some of the same expenses that end up being cost prohibitive to people for building a conventional home. So that is why the conversation in the allowance for tiny houses on wheels, or this conversation about ADUs, is necessary, because there's not the cost of that process is lessened, and there's the additional benefit for considering, outside of just traditional building.
Yeah, I see a few people are saying asking questions about I'm not affiliated with the tiny house community in College Park at all, but I do travel over there and look through it and whatnot. So my friends are actually working on that project.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge that people have to recognize. So I always see the comments around um the cost for small houses. So in conversations that I've had before, it's important to know that the cost per square foot for a tiny house ends up being more than the cost per square foot for a conventional house. That's just something upfront that you have to know about. The cost that I paid for building my tiny house per square foot is more than what would have cost a conventional home would cost per square foot. But then there's also the benefit for, as I talk about tiny houses on wheels, I own my house free and clear. The cost is still going to be, this is the cost for the tiny house. You pay for it if you finance it. The it's still not the 30-year, the 15-year, the 30-year mortgage where you end up paying, multiple times what you started out paying. So there is still some benefit to, even though the cost is expensive, the costs are rising, there still is some benefit around building small and tiny houses on wheels.
Yes.
Um, Let me see what other comments. I have some more questions that I want to ask you, Quentin, but I want to see if there's some other questions in the chat that I need to address. Absolutely. Thanks to both of you. This is everywhere in the U.S. We must make all politicians address this dehumanizing crisis. Absolutely. This is the conversation. This is the work that I really want to do. This is something important. Housing is a right that we all should have. Um, it is a standard conversation. And so, Rosalind, I see your comment about the cost of the community that's in Georgia, the tiny house community. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I do want to I want you to understand that the cost per square footage is always going to be more for a tiny house. You have to do your due diligence. Is it affordable? Depending on the amenities they're offering, that's also going to increase the cost of those homes, and that's one of the things that has to be considered. Let's see. Robert, you're absolutely right. So Sophia's asking what the cost is for your unit. It would be for your units. Do you have that information right now, or is that something that you're still kind of nailing down? And I know you talked about financing a bit.
Right now, we're looking at the units to range between $65,000 upwards of $120,000, depending on what type of features going to be inside of the units. Also, the price includes the site work, as far as your foundations, as far as your permitting, your fees, your construction, if you have to move trees and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you. So Teresa, you're asking, do you think Charlotte would adopt this idea of tiny houses on foundation as opposed to tiny houses on wheels? Absolutely. So Charlotte does allow tiny houses. They don't have a square footage minimum requirement. They do allow small houses, tiny houses on foundation, um, just not tiny houses on wheels. So yes, they are open to that if that's, excuse me, something you're interested in. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this conversation up in just a few minutes, but I wanted to, Quentin, I always ask a couple of questions, um, personal questions, as we kind of get back to intent and purpose around the work that we're doing. So, as you have been going through this process, um, this journey, what have you learned about yourself personally, or what are you learning about yourself personally as you're entering, going through this journey and doing this work?
Whew, that's a loaded question, right? Personally, when when I got focused on this, I had to realize I have to get my personal finances together, right? I have to make sure that one, I became debt free, and then also acquire enough personal credit, business credit, and things so that way I can finance this myself. Because no one's gonna believe in what you can do unless you can show that you've done it yourself. You got to be able to
Hmm.
commit to the time it takes. Um, last year alone, I mean, for the last 2 years, I spent about 125, 150 nights in hotels traveling around the United States. Literally living like a nomad, even though man, telling you my home here in Atlanta, but literally traveling across the United States in my vehicle, visiting all these different sites, warehouses, manufacturers, meeting people like yourself, and finding out what can I really bring back home and build to take elsewhere.
Hmm.
I also learned how important it is to have family close by. Your family and your real friends, because when you go on this journey of trying to create something that it hasn't been done before, you're gonna need those people around, and also you're building it for your family, and it's somewhat of a legacy project as well for
Yeah.
me.
Legacy. And so that kind of ties back to the thing that I often talk about, that no, not often, I always talk about here, wealth building. We always want to talk about opportunities for wealth building, and this, considering this affordable housing conversation, and considering living housing in a different way, are it's always going to be opportunities for wealth building. It's the opportunity that, as I talk to Black and Brown communities, that remain last in the numbers for home ownership. It is the thinking outside of the box. It is the thinking of, how do I get to home ownership in a different route when we remain at the bottom of the list year after year, that is going to allow us to get to real wealth building. And these are the conversations that are important to consider. And this is the action that's important to consider this for, specifically for our community. As again, year after year, we remain last on that list of home ownership. And yes, real friends, as Quentin was talking about, is important. But yes, go ahead, Quentin. I'm sorry I cut you off.
So another thing I want to add is this: a lot of people ask me how you get it financed if I want to do it on my own or whatnot. The problem with people wanting to get an ADU on their own is the fact that their personal credit is not good enough. They can't apply for a home line of credit or whatnot. They can't pay cash for it. They don't have enough cash on hand. The only way they would be able to make the money have the money for the ADU is to sell their home. And unfortunately, if they sell their home, they'll never be able to afford to live in the same neighborhood. So
Hmm.
that's why it's key for us to come up with different initiative to basically build these ADUs, get them financed the non-traditional way, and allow them to be able to pull out the equity in the future or whatnot.
Yeah, and what you just said speaks to another concern that we are having, um, in neighborhoods, our neighborhoods that are experiencing gentrification, where the home buyers come in and they flash some money to people who are experiencing financial challenges, who've not seen that much of a lump sum money, and they jump on it because they think, this is an opportunity to have some money. And then they take the money and get out and realize this money was nothing, because I can't afford to live anywhere with this money. I can't afford to buy in this area because the housing costs are two, three times what my original house cost. And that, is leading to the gentrification, and also a major, major problem in our community. And they, it's on purpose, it's by design, as they flash money and people take money because they've not had access to that money. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of the homeowners that signed up for our program, she bought her house for $186,000. Is now valued at $460 something thousand dollars. Um, and she's been unemployed for the last 7 months now. So even if she wanted to pull equity out of her home, she couldn't even do that because she wouldn't qualify because she didn't have any income coming in. So she's in a very tight position. And for us to come in and be able to provide an ADU and providing the income coming from that helps out a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Casey, you're speaking to the tiny house community that Will, who or initially Will was working more on the tiny house on wheels side, and he, a few years ago, partnered with the city of Clarkston and some others in the housing arena, and created a tiny house community. They are on foundation. Micro Atlanta is the tiny house organization there, and they do have a tiny house community. But it was built maybe five or more years ago, and it did they did come out to be affordable. So if we compare them, and I'm not getting ready to throw anybody under the bus either, still, but if we compare those houses to the community in College Park, those tiny houses, there is a big difference in the luxury that of the way those homes are being built. And so the tiny house conversation for the houses in College Park, the luxury is raising the price tag of those homes as if you compare them to that community in Clarkston. So I will say that. Anita is asking a question, and I don't know, and this is probably just personal opinion. Um, what your thoughts around comparing the U.S. unhoused situation to other parts of the world? What are your thoughts around that?
I think I think we treat people who are unhoused here the worst. Or that that's a tough thing because um, I went to places like Australia. When I was in Sydney, Australia, the people there who were unhoused were treated a lot better. They had access to health care. They had access to public showers, public bathrooms. And you come here, it's like there's a lot of restraints from that. There's a lot of crime in those particular facilities or whatnot. Um, it's a it's be up
They're
and down
treated,
basically.
yeah, they're treated as criminals here, and oftentimes what's happened is they don't have access to the services they need. Not everyone who's unhoused wishes to be unhoused, but they need access to services. They need access to mental health care. Most people, if you consider it, are a paycheck away. A paycheck away from being unhoused. So all it takes is illness or missing a paycheck or something like a pandemic to happen, and people are then placed in different situations that are just teetering around the conversation of being unhoused. From my travels, like I was just in Panama May or so. They're unhoused there. They have a whole area that we might consider like a shanty town where people are living in um, tents and living in homes that would likely be condemned in other areas, and they may not have access to some of the same services. And a lot of these people, like we talked about before, have income. They are the working poor, but they don't have make enough income to afford some of the other areas, and so they find themselves in that situation. Um, yeah, so Randolph is saying the U.S. has more programs to assist people in need in general compared to other countries, but overall, you can live better on far less than in other countries than you can here. Absolutely. And the conversation around healthcare that Quinton just mentioned is an important conversation. So having access to those services. All right, so I am going to wrap this conversation up. I have two more questions. Quentin, what would be the title of your autobiography? That's one of my standard questions that I ask my guests. What would be the title of your autobiography?
I don't know. That's a good one. I guess uh, the king of manifestation.
The King of Manifestation. I like that
Yeah,
title. That's a great title. Speaking,
I started
we
doing that.
just last week, that was what we talked about last week, speaking things into existing existence and manifesting dreams. And as I was celebrating my Essence magazine feature, I was talking about the fact that that was on my vision board and had been on my vision board since the beginning of the year, and how manifesting your dreams is important. So I like that, the King of Manifestation. um
Hey, it's important.
Absolutely. What's one question or that I didn't ask that you wish I had asked?
What's the one question that you pretty much asked a lot of the questions that I wanted to be asked right now. The biggest thing is that, and when we talk about manifestation, the 100 homes that we're building here, I look fast at as far as we're looking at building 1,000 homes. We're looking at building 2,000 homes. We're looking at building 10,000 homes over the next 5 to 10 years or whatnot. And that is the way I want to be the most impactful person as far as in affordable housing, workforce housing, or whatever hashtag we want to come up with. But those are the things that really stand out to me.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Sophia's saying thank you for this great feast of information. I think I told y'all we always take it back to a soul conversation. We always take it back to intent and intentional um, living and the person, who that person is, to help us understand how they ended up on this journey that they're on. They like your title, Quentin. I think they would buy your book. So maybe you and I need to have a 5 a.m. writers club, because I need to write my book too. So maybe you can get on to writing your book.
Well, I'm gonna have to use
They
Chat GPT.
you cannot use Chat GPT to write your book.
There's nothing wrong with using Chat GPT to write something. All right.
Chat GPT is saving my life in some places right now, and I'm not going to say exactly where, but for risk of incriminating myself, but Chat GPT and I are friends, and that's all I got to
Yeah.
say about that.
One of the
Um,
biggest things, one of the things I want to add is this. I didn't want to be long winded about the program. I didn't want to be long winded about the efforts and things we're going to be doing, the features of the homes and whatnot. But stay tuned for when we drop the link. It's going to have everything on there. It's going to have every feature of the homes. It's going to have all the benefits. It's going to have all the requirements for the homeowners, and have all the requirements for people that want to be tenants and whatnot. And they want you to share it, because all this data that we're going to be able to collect, we're going to be able to help out so many more people. And it's going to be important that everybody shares the information about the ADUs, shares about information about the tiny houses on foundations, tiny houses on wheels, or any of that stuff. We're going to have our own coalition of people that are going to be change makers. And that's
Absolutely,
what we're working on right now.
absolutely. So again, this won't be the last that we see and talk to Quentin, because I am trying to again figure out the synergies for how we work together in this conversation, because we're all really trying to get to the same point. So we're having those conversations. So we'll be keeping you all informed. I will provide information in the video description to connect with Quentin right now on Instagram, his website, and then once he provides the link for his form to me, I will also update that information um, in the video description. Robert, so Quentin, you don't attend my sessions on a regular, but Robert asked me generally every Sunday would I marry him. So he today he's decided to be on his best behavior, and he's not asking the question because he's trying to stay on topic. So just know that you've garnered a bit of respect from Robert, who's not asking me to marry him today because
Well, let me
he's
ask
staying
you:
on topic.
is Robert living in a tiny home himself?
I have no idea. Robert shows up
Robert,
on Sundays in
Robert, are
my
you living in a
chat.
tiny home?
He's
Because
asked me would I
if you
live in a
move in one
big
of
house.
well, if Robert moves into one of these ADUs, he can be able to get a ring for you soon.
Thank you all for joining, Michelle. Yes, I need an accountability partner, but I am in New Orleans, and it is my intent to get my life together. Randolph is saying Robert is a player. Let me find out Robert be in other people's chat asking them to marry them. So Sophia's saying she's interested in the program for Florida. So when we get that form, the link when I get the form, the link to the form out there in my video description. Please fill out that form so that you can add the information. So Robert just shared that he lives in a 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath. So one day Robert will show himself. But thank you, Robert, for staying on point today. I
Yes,
appreciate you. I am going to close us out. Quentin is there. Before I do my close out, and again, y'all, Watch the replay if you have questions about ADUs. We did talk about that extensively, and talk about this program. And stay tuned. The information will be available. Quentin, anything else before I do my closeout that you want and need to share with the audience?
I want to build more.
You want to build more. All right. I love that. All right, I'm going to do my closeout. Let me get to the right screen. I thank you all, as always, for joining me, as you do on Sundays. I so appreciate you all showing up. Robert Teresa says you need to go tiny. So, thank you all so much for joining. This has been one of the conversations on intimate spaces. As always, okay, Sophia, I need some content. So Sophia just offered to be my accountability partner. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you. I appreciate you all for being here to participate in this conversation. Thank you, Quentin, for joining me. Apologies in the beginning for our technical difficulties. We did have a bit of a challenge, but we got here, and this was a great conversation, as I knew it would be. I always ask you all to, if the video was helpful to you, you like it, you share it, tell your friends about it, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications so that you'll know when content is available, and then join us on Sundays for these conversations and more. And then, as Quentin said, you have to get involved, show up. Y'all get in Secretary Fudge's, is that her name? I think that's right. Lord, I forgot her name. Y'all get in her DMs like I'm in her DMs, and so we can start talking about different options for affordable housing, and doing things differently, because that's important, and it's a conversation that has to be continued. All right, everybody, have a safe Sunday. Quentin, hold on for a second. Don't hang up. But everybody else, we thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.